The mountains remember. Every trail, every hollow, every clapboard shack still whispers with the voices of the past. Out here, under the cold shine of the old south moon, the stories don't rest easy, they linger. Tales of wandering spirits, cursed valleys, and shadows that walk when the sun goes down. These are the ghost stories of Appalachia, passed down in hushed voices, now brought back to life. Ghosts of My Grandfathers. Episode 1. The Thing in the Root Cellar.
In the fall of 1959, Tommy Silas had just finished a 3-month project with a logging company between Pound and Clintwood, Virginia. It would be another 2 weeks before the crew started cutting the next tract of timber, and Tommy decided to use the time to pay a surprise visit to his family in Jenkins, Kentucky. Despite having a pocket full of cash, Tommy had no transportation of his own. Since none of his crewmates were planning to head in the direction of Jenkins, Tommy opted to simply walk over the mountain. It was only 20 or so miles as the crow flies between him and Jenkins, and Tommy knew every trail and route. After packing his knapsack with provisions for the trip and finding a suitable game trail down the mountain, Tommy set out on his journey. The first few hours of the hike went as expected, and he made quick time in the cool autumn air. But just before nightfall, Tommy hit a snag. His path had taken a sudden and unexpected drop, straight down some 60 feet. During the past month, a strip mining operation had carved a chunk out of the mountainside, leaving a sheer wall just below the ridgeline. Finding no safe descent, Tommy was forced to follow the ridge until the wall ended. As he turned further north on the trail, Tommy noticed dense clouds racing the twilight. It was going to be a wet and miserable night. Tommy cursed his luck. The easy descent down the mountain had become a trudging march across the ridge in an effort to circumvent the strip mine. The forest hummed with the soft percussion of drizzle on leaves. Despite being well into the fall color change, the canopy was still thick, though not thick enough to keep him dry if the rain became heavier. Tommy hadn't planned for rain. His canvas sleeping bag would stop little more than heavy dew. The path was becoming slick with newly fallen wet leaves. Every step dug into the damp litter, filling his nose with the scent of decay and fresh earth. He would need to find shelter soon. A deep outcrop of rock, a shallow cave, or perhaps the crumbling cabin nestled into the hillside just a few yards ahead. Even though the potential shelter was initially a welcome sight, Tommy was wary of the dilapidated shack illuminated by his battery light. Such structures often served as hideouts for moonshiners and were usually not as abandoned as they appeared. Approaching with caution, Tommy scanned the forest around the cabin, looking for signs of recent human activity. No worn trail led to the door, no fire pits scarred the nearby forest floor, and no one had bothered to clear the large branch that had obviously fallen across the roof months past. Tommy studied the cabin for a few seconds longer, until the persistent drizzle became a downpour. "The hell with it," he muttered as he pulled open the rotting door and stepped inside. No human had occupied the cabin in decades. Within the glow of his light, Tommy noted a multitude of squirrels' nests and cobwebs, in addition to piles of broken mason jars, the latter being a telltale sign that this had indeed been a moonshiner's cabin some time in the past. Now it was a rotting hovel with just enough remaining roof to keep Tommy dry for the night. Along the back wall stood a crude wooden platform that appeared to be a makeshift cot. Tommy brushed away the dried leaves and squirrel droppings before testing the structure against his weight. The cot creaked, but held true, and Tommy propped his head on his knapsack. The rain made a soothing patter on the rusted tin roof, and soon he dozed off. A sharp crack woke Tommy from his dreamless sleep. In those first lucid moments between slumber and waking, he assumed it was thunder. When the sound came a second time, he realized it was beneath him. Tommy stared at the floor in disbelief. From below his feet came the muffled sound of small hooves running up wooden steps, and once again, the sharp crack on the floor. Tommy leaped from the cot. His foot caught the edge of a raised board, and he quickly realized there was a hatch beneath the cot. Many mountain homes had root cellars dug into the cold earth to preserve food during lean times, but Tommy figured the space below him had likely been used to hide moonshine. Another thud on the floor broke his thought train, and Tommy called out, "Hey, who's down there? Do you need help?" Silence. Tommy crept over to the weathered hatch. The dust from decades of neglect had obscured its outline when he'd initially entered the cabin, but it was now clearly visible due to the repeated strikes from below. Tommy pushed the cot off the hatch and discovered a length of heavy rope that had been fashioned into a crude handle. Once again he called out, "Do you need help? Who's down there?" And once again, silence. Tommy absently licked his lips. They had become dry from anxiety. He was second-guessing his decision as his fingers closed around the dirty rope handle. The hatch was made from thick, hand-hewn planks, and Tommy was forced to lean back with his full weight. For a split second, he was sure the rope would snap, but the hatch finally gave way, and then exploded. The dislodged hatch heaved into the air with enough force to knock Tommy backward, the rope handle tearing the skin on his palms. The black pit yawned before him, reeking of decayed earth and something else, something foul. A flight of rickety stairs descended into the darkness. His bewilderment was quickly replaced by terror as the clop of hooves, followed by the strained bleating of a goat, echoed from somewhere deep in the cellar. Tommy backpedaled, too fast. Tripping over his own heels, he crashed to the floor, oblivious to his shredded palms and bruised backside. His face hung aghast in disbelief at the sight before him. Standing at the threshold of the cellar was an emaciated billy goat. Its black horns curled twice behind its tattered ears, and its glazed, milky green eyes stared blindly at Tommy. Putrid black ichor ran in rivulets from its nose and mouth into its matted beard. Moldy gray fur gave way to livid patches of flesh crawling with maggots. But most horrifying of all, the beast had no legs. The goat snorted, dropped its head, and pawed at the floor. Torn stumps moved beneath its soiled coat as phantom hooves scraped the boards. Tommy screamed and rolled to his feet. The door was only a yard away. Once again, that terrible bleating pierced the air, and the clatter of spectral hooves followed. Tommy dipped his shoulder, intent on bursting through the door, when suddenly he couldn't breathe. It was as if a sledgehammer had hit him between the shoulders, knocking the air from his lungs, while furrows of white-hot pain tore down his back. The rotted door shattered into splinters, his weight carrying him out of the cabin in a rolling tumble face down into the damp forest floor. Tommy gasped, and the cool night air burned as it filled his lungs. Pain brought clarity, and he leapt to his feet, fearing another attack from the creature. But none came. The monstrous goat was gone. Flight overtook fight, and Tommy sprinted into the night. He had a fleeting notion that the beast was still in the cabin, maybe couldn't leave the cabin, but he wasn't going to stay and find out. It could keep his lantern and knapsack for all he cared. He ran and never looked back. Tommy ran until his legs gave out, and then he ran some more. The sun was just cresting the mountain when he stumbled out of the tree line and into a ditch. The shock of the cold mud sparked enough adrenaline to get him back on his feet, and he almost cried when he saw the Shelby Branch coal tipple. Exhausted, filthy, and bloody, Tommy somehow found enough energy to shamble the remaining mile to his parents' house in Jenkins.
Tommy never went back on the mountain. He quit his job with the logging company and went to work as a stockboy in a local grocery store. Years would pass before he would talk to anyone about that night in the cabin. Most folks dismissed him as a bit crazy. Some laughed at his story, at least until they saw his back and the ragged scars shaped like cloven hooves.
Thank you for listening to tonight's tale. The mountains hold many more secrets, and I hope you'll join me again beneath the old south moon, where the past never truly rests. Please like and subscribe for more.